So you went to city council yesterday, and you said, hey, by the way, has anyone looked at the law recently? Because it's the same as 1959. It still says non-property owners cannot be on this board. What the heck are you doing?
Exactly. And, one of the things that the city council might say is, that's a state law, and we're just in compliance with state law. Yes and no. Yes, you are in compliance with state law. That is true. And so the real property ownership part is the state law. But the part that city council does have control over is the way that they appoint the members. So the other argument I had is that there's a lack of transparency. So for instance, I told you about these 3 board appointments that are vacancies on this board. That was posted in the public domain April 19th or so, on or about. That was public notice was put there and citizens could apply. But the strange thing was that another appointment was made, or reappointment, on June 23rd and extended for a month. It expires at the end of this month, but that wasn't posted anywhere. And
they appointed somebody for a month? I don't understand.
It was a reappointment. So see, there were 3 vacancies on the board. Those citizens were appointed. Then there was one member whose term had expired, and so that member was reappointed. And then there are 3 members that actually expire at the end of this month. But see, the mayor has the authority to reappoint. And so maybe the statutory language that governs urban renewal boards needs to be tweaked a little bit in the next legislative session. And we know that's a little ways away, but during the interim, I do believe that I'll make that part of my cause.
All right. So what is it that you asked city council to do yesterday? What did you call upon them to do regarding, being your public representative? You're basically, your public servant, if you will. What did you ask them to do?
Right. So one of the things that I put in my written testimony, but I didn't say out loud, was that the mayor could, in fact, ask Senator Watson, for example, to sponsor legislation during the next legislative session. So one way to repeal the law is to file a lawsuit, which who between the 2 of us is rich enough to just go hire an attorney to sue the state? So that's why I used the Department of Justice. The other reason is because I know that the Department of Justice is actually overseeing Texas right now because of all of the redistricting. So I figured maybe now's a good time to say, hey, since you're already looking our way, here's another issue that's, something that you can do something about. Or
since you're already peeping in, why don't you check this while you're at it?
Exactly. So that was kind of the issue there. So the other thing was not necessarily F1, but to say, well, hey, wait a minute. If the senator is so involved in our local politics, then maybe because the state has something to do with local politics as it relates to disenfranchising our citizens, then maybe he would be a good senator to sponsor the legislation. Now, ideally, Representative Donna Dukes is probably the person who, on the House side, would be a good sponsor for that legislation because her representation is east of I-35. So, she would be a good person on the House side, and I think Senator Watson kind of owes us a favor with a little reciprocity would be nice.
I think Senator Watson definitely should. Senator Watson was actually one of the sponsors of the Fusion Center legislation in this past session, which was great. He, Austin has the most transparent fusion center in Texas, it's basically a data information collection center. And he said, okay, well, if that's the standard in Austin, let's make that standard across the state so that citizens will know kind of what's going on as far as what information is being collected, preventing their personal health information from being collected by the government, and so forth. So he was a great legislator this past session. I'm going to have to ride you, though, about Donna Dukes. I don't know if you know about the controversy of her spending money that perhaps did not belong to her, that was part of a campaign contribution or part of something else. But, she got reelected anyway, and I don't know if she's ever going to get unelected. She's very popular where she is, but there's some ethical questions regarding her that I'm sure the listener can Google Donna Dukes, D-A-W-N-A, Dukes.
2 N's, actually.
2 N's. Oh, well. 2 N's.
You're going to look it up.
and you can find out more about her.
Her name came up because of the mayor's executive assistant yesterday. because
Okay.
that wasn't my first choice of a representative.
Okay.
But she said maybe that's the right person. So just so you know, that was from the mayor's office.
Well, I'm sure Representative Dukes is listening right now and is probably pulling her hair out just thinking about this.
Probably so. So the other issue is that there's a board, it's called the Education Consortium, if you will, and it's dormant. It's been like a dead board, and there aren't any educators on it, which is odd, but it's supposed to.
No educators on the Education Consortium.
That's what I said too. And then to top matters off, there were no African Americans. And as a former teacher of the year, I found that suspect. So I'm thinking, if I don't qualify, then what really is the criteria? So I was just asking the mayor, one, think about our population here in Austin and think about doing a better job of transparency as it relates to board appointments, and then appoint an educator to the Education Consortium, and particularly a black educator would be nice.
Yeah, I mean that's the the black community in Austin, as well as the Latino population, are the ones that kind of need public education the most, and they're the ones who are really getting, let's just say, poo-pooed upon this next biennium with the huge cuts in education. That we really need some strong leaders in the educational community to see us through these budget cuts and get minority students on track for success, which we're really not doing right now. We're not making any effort whatsoever.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting when you talk about history is that there are success stories. And let me just, for the sake of trying to be objective here, there are pockets of excellence with minority students in Austin. So let me just put that out there. But overall, there's a history of divisiveness, if you will. And I think probably the best example I can give of a two-tiered school system is the Liberal Arts and Science Academy and LBJ High School. So upstairs you have this super magnet program, the Liberal Arts and Science Academy, and it's basically white with a few brown and black students in it. And downstairs you have LBJ High School. And so LBJ High School, before Dr. Forjon left the district, was actually on the unacceptable list, academically unacceptable. It was one of those, there was 7 of 11 schools that were academically unacceptable when Dr. Forjon left the district on or about 2008-2009 time frame. But upstairs, you have an exemplary school with LASA being looked at nationally, if you will.
So is that a good situation where you have basically an honors program with inside a school that is primarily minority students, but it seems like the honors program you mentioned seems to be mostly white with just a sprinkling of minorities in there?
Right, and there's a history, and so I am truly appreciative of the scholar Larry Cuban from Stanford University, who did a report 1954 to 2008, and it actually talks about the history of Austin. And my scholarship is actually a rebuttal, if you will, in many respects to Dr. Cuban's research, because in the end, he painted a picture of, things aren't so bad. He did say that these magnet programs were developed to keep whites in the district. If you think back to desegregation and white flight, then he's absolutely right. They had to figure out a way to keep the whites in the district. But here we are in 2011, and that's still okay to have this two-tiered system. Of course, those that are in the system would say, but the program's open to everybody. So if they want to apply, they can. But I do think that a little proactive effort in that arena would be nice. So
some encouragement and letting students know about the program, and perhaps encouraging them to strive for that, rather than you want to be an LBJ with your friends. You don't want to be upstairs with them.
Exactly. I think there was a senior that I talked to a couple of years ago said it best. He said, miss, it's sugar-coated segregation, and they think we don't know. So the students get it, right? But
now, viewer and listener, I promised you a controversial question, and here it is. Zenobia, as a white person, it's not really clear-cut about what terminology I should use when talking about different ethnic groups. Now, Hispanic is a very I would say term you'd see on a survey, but when I spoke with members of the quote Hispanic community, I've heard that Latino is what they like. Now what about the black community? Because oftentimes we hear the term African American, and that seems to be a term of greater respect. But I rarely hear, when I just hear black friends talk, I rarely hear them say that. I hear them just use the term black. I use the term white for myself, and I just wanted to ask you, what do you think is appropriate or politically correct for non-minorities to use to describe blacks/African Americans? Not to put you on the spot and have you represent your entire race or anything, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, so I'm representing myself, right?
Right, of course.
I actually just say black, but for the most part, if I'm writing something that's scholarly, like the article I mentioned in Harvard Journal of African American Public Policy, the title of the article is I-35 Divide Conundrum. Can a true community university partnership grant Austin's gifted, talented K-12 African American males access to college? So I use African American because that seems to be more acceptable as a term, but if I'm making a point as I'm writing in scholarly terms, I actually will use black and white to ensure that the reader gets my point. But in terms of history, Negro, as in 1928 Negro District, I think it's important to use the language of the time to contextualize whatever whatever we're discussing.
Now, see, that's a word I really don't like to go near. That's a word that I think is very antiquated, and I would get really funny looks if I said it in anything other than a very explicit context and said, back then these were referred to as, quote, Negro districts or something like that. Otherwise, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, and I can totally understand it. Even in Larry Cuban's scholarship, he put in quotation marks when he was talking about maybe Negro or black sometime. If he wasn't saying African American, as best I recall, I haven't read the piece in a while, but I do recall him emphasizing in quotation marks, and I think that's the safe thing to do. But then again, you listen to some blacks use the N-word and they think that's okay, but now I'm with Oprah on that one. That's not okay with me. So you can use black, you can use African American, and I'm not offended by that. But the shucking and jiving and using the N-word is just, when I'm with Oprah with the lynching and the history behind it, that's really just not okay with me.